I gazed at the woman who helped my wife slide down her body. What the hell is wrong with you? I thought you were our friend. We discussed what it would imply if a spouse cheated. We all agreed. And now this. He's famous. So it's okay. You will get over it shortly. I've always thought you were a little dumb, but I vastly underestimated your stupidity. Please do one thing for me. Don't talk to me again. Ever again. You would not like it if you did. If I'm in the water and I go down for the third time and you pass by, keep going. I would rather die. Now move away from me. It was clear that she was out of it. I'd never had such a conversation with someone in our circle before. I turned and began walking towards the door when I was stopped by a large bouncer. Is the night over yet? He smirked. Get out of my path, drunk and angry. For everyone's sake, I believe you should simply turn around and return to your table, where you can enjoy some drinks. I'll make certain they're at the house. I gazed at him till he became nervous. How much does he pay you to intervene? Hopefully a lot. Because if you don't get out of my way right now, you will need every dime. His eyes widened and he pouted faintly. You cannot have me. I'll wipe the floor with your pathetic ass and not even break a sweat. More than likely. But you should know something. I don't fight fairly and don't forgive. If you beat me up, make sure you finish me off. Because once I recuperate, I'll come after you. You'll have to think twice about going out in the dark for the rest of your life. Perhaps I'll simply hire a couple of guys and be 1,000 miles away when it happens. Maybe I'll pay them a bit more to ensure your career as a club security guard ends. If I can't reach you, you probably married your parents. You'll feel sick every time you look at them after I'm finished, so you have a choice. Move. He did not notice as he took a step back. It's funny that he was at least 655 inches tall and weighed around 300 pounds. I had 511 and 180 in me, and I was betting he had a far better fat-to-muscle ratio than I did. I had something that he didn't. Pure nuclear wrath. It could not be beaten. I was almost to the door when someone grabbed my arm. I grabbed the hand and twisted around, yanking the person who was holding me away. I realized it was Janie. I let her leave. I was just about to walk away when she grabbed my leg. Do not do this. Think about your children. I gazed at her with all the contempt I could muster. You mean like when she sneaked out the back door with that asshole? As for family, I no longer have any. I will always be good to my children, unlike the bitch who used to be my wife. Perhaps I'll file for custody throughout the divorce. After all, her actions today show that she is an inadequate mother. She let go of him, covering her mouth with her hand. I got to the elevator before another round rang out. Bob, think about it. Will you honestly toss away 10 years because of one night? I observed my former pal and his gang. I didn't throw anything out. She did look me in the eye and said you thought what she did was okay. Every one of you assholes, look at me. I want every single one of you to tell me that you don't believe what she did was that horrible, and that if your wife had done it, everything would have been great. Oops. Sorry, Harry. The ship has already sailed. You know she's going to see him again, right? Harry? With a glance at Erica. She hung her head and went back to the clubhouse. The others were largely yelling at each other, so I seized the chance to get inside the elevator. It did not take me long to pack. I left Linda's stuff where it was. If she wanted it, she could come and have it. I was dismissed 30 minutes later and had already arrived at the parking lot when I heard them. Apparently, my pals were waiting for me. They began arguing, and Eric stood in front of my car door. You have until I turn this thing on to move out of the way. Anyone who doesn't will be spread out around the parking lot. Move it now. You will listen to us. That was all he had time to say before I smashed my fist into his stomach. None of them were fighters and none had learned self-defense, but I did because I had a temper and was frequently involved in fights as a teenager. As a result, I got into some legal difficulty. I attended a few counseling or juvie sessions. It truly helped me with my anger management difficulties. I still lost my temper, but only on rare occasions. And for now, I didn't mind. I walked over and unlocked my door while staring back at them. I moved into gear and stepped on the gas, accelerating with a screech of tires. They scattered like quails. I had no idea where I was going or what I would do once there. She'd been gone for over an hour by that point, so she was probably already having fun with him. My initial reaction was to find them and leave them both in a pool of blood. However, I doubted it would happen for a variety of reasons. The guy was the local pro football team's #1 tight end, and they were hoping to have a winning season this year, possibly even winning the title, on his abilities. He had just signed a 3-year contract worth $106 million on top of the millions he had already earned. His residence will most likely be more securely locked than Fort Knox. Furthermore, I was not a martial arts specialist or a former Navy SEAL. I was simply a person, albeit one in good shape. I had no access, unlimited money, no friends in high or low places. I was sitting at a stoplight when it hit me. There was something I could do, and it was time to get started. I realized that if I continued, there would be no turning back. Before I began, I paused in front of a late-night diner that offered free Wi-Fi and considered my retribution strategy. Social networking was the way forward. Linda had every imaginable social media account, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I was not an IT nerd. I had trouble getting online, but I knew someone who could. My niece, who had just turned 18, had received scholarship offers from Ivy League schools and 2 technical colleges on both coasts. I called her, and she was astonished to hear from me so late. But I promised her I'd pay her $500 if she came and helped me. She was quite fascinated. I was going to tell her where I was when I got a ping. I get it. UNC will be there in 7 minutes. I wondered who we were, but as long as she was walking, I didn't mind. While I waited, I went inside and requested the waitress for a quiet booth as far away from other customers as possible. Then I surprised her. "You close at midnight, right?" She nodded. "Tell me how many customers you'll have by the time you close and how much to tip while you're pondering. Let me inform you that 2 of my friends are coming over soon, and I want the apartment to be as full as possible. Tell the owner that I'll make up the lost revenues if he lets us sit here and work for an hour or 2, and an additional $200 for you if you continue to bring in soda and coffee." She grinned. "It's the end of February, and it's quite cold outdoors. Everyone who has plugged in is either out or at home. I'll close now. I can get away with it since I own the property. Give me $403, and 1 for my cook. Is there anything you need before I send them home?" Just then, my niece arrived, accompanied by a young man. I almost did not recognize her. She appeared to have really cleaned up her act. I apologized instantly. "I apologize, guys. If I had known you had plans, I would not have invited you to come. I am sure you will think my wishes are strange, but please hear me out first. Let me explain what happened." When I was finished, they glanced at me with jaws dropped. Nanette hissed indignantly. "Let me tell you that your wife, my aunt, left you alone in a club to spend the night with a superstar jock, and your pals covered for her as she drove away. What kind of assholes do you associate with? These are unexplored waters for me. They are genuinely her buddies. In college, she hung out with the same people she did in high school. She was overjoyed when my firm offered to relocate me to this location. As we drove away, she would show Chicago in her rearview mirror. I had been around them for a long time and assumed we shared the same attitude on life. I can promise you that we are no longer friendly. Let me tell you what I want, and you tell me how terrible an idea it is and how much trouble I'll get into if I do it." When I told them what I wanted, Eric and Nanette exchanged glances before laughing when they realized what was going on. Nanette requested Eric to take the black box out of the automobile. The black box turned out to be an unregistered laptop that she had gently modified. "Nobody will be able to trace it. I'll call stations all around the world and won't be on wait for more than a half second at any of them. It's something I've been working on since I was 13 years old and kept hidden until I was old enough to apply for a patent. That explains a lot of why all these schools are out to get me, and the military offered me a highly lucrative opportunity to forego college and go right to work for them." Nanette asked a variety of questions as she set everything up. "I received it," she exclaimed while showing me my wife's Facebook screen. "I'm in. Let the chaos begin." They scanned through her posts, pausing to inquire who the different people were, while Nanette took notes on her phone. When a picture of her closest friend and a mysterious person appeared on the screen, I nearly lost consciousness. Then a thought struck me, and I gave her the names of my so-called pals who were with us. She set up all the accounts in a matter of minutes. Nanette smiled, staring at Dee. "She's got something to show me. Are you ready? Make it as unpleasant as possible." Eric was quiet for a minute. Are you certain about this? Once we begin, there is no turning back. Are you putting a grenade into your marriage? I am sure. Since this started, I haven't thought about anything else. There's no way I could ever live with her again. She responded by throwing a grenade. I'm going to DEFCON 4. Consider nuclear possibilities and get started. Nanette started typing, claiming to be my wife. An exciting update. I'm pleased to say that I've officially joined the SS The Celebrity Club. It is her invention. Sounds delicious and chill. I'm with Mark. I'm pleased to report that he has a really tight end and can truly Ramadan when he finds a hole to sneak into. I'm very thrilled he chose me out of all the women in the club. Thank you to my girlfriend for intervening to chat to my spouse as I was drifting away. I would say I owe you a debt of gratitude, but I've done the same thing for her previously. Remember the girls' weekend in Atlantic City? You scored on a hockey player and he apparently knows how to score pucks, haha. Following that, Nanette made a series of happy faces. Then she started again. We're currently relaxing, so to speak, during halftime. We will begin the second half soon. Hopefully, it will extend into overtime. She then fabricated texts from all of the women at the club, giving her literal high fives and saying they couldn't wait to spend time with the stud. Janie admonished her husband for being a patsy on the needles. He does not have to be rich. He only has to be strung out and last longer than 5 minutes. She found some pictures of the asshole and shared them, along with some photos of Linda. It was almost late by then, yet the notifications were flashing as people looked at the posts. I'm sure phones rang in her social circle despite the late hour. Nanette then fired up Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I wasn't concerned about her receiving calls because I knew she had switched off her phone and I couldn't interfere with her plans. The comments began pouring in. Is this a joke? I bet your husband doesn't find it funny. What the hell is going on with you? It was her favorite aunt speaking. I wondered why she was still awake. Nanette responded, "This is no joke." I spotted an opportunity and seized it. How many people can boast of having slept with a celebrity? If you don't trust me, come to his house around 10 o'clock tomorrow, 130 Wyndham Circle. It is a bloody mansion. The rich truly are unique. Perhaps we'll be awake by then, and you can see my walk of humiliation as I leave his house. Or perhaps it is a walk of fame. Another user has joined this thread. I didn't recognize her, but it didn't matter. She had almost 700 acquaintances, all of whom were on the rumor mill. Really? Are you proud of leaving your husband? Do you truly believe your marriage will survive this? I adore my spouse. He's the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. And he loves me. So I know he'll get through it. There may be some hardship, but I will try my best to spoil him and he will forgive me in the end. It means nothing. It was only one night and I won't do it again. Really? Are you drunk? As for not doing it again, did you ever imagine you'd do it the first time? You are delusional. I am giving up on you as a friend. Do not try to contact me. I hope in the end you still believe it was worthwhile. It could be all you have left to hang on to. I've now recognized the name. Her boss's wife gave me another idea. Annette then uploaded the entire thing on the company page. I bet she will have some fascinating chats on Monday. Another person responded. Isn't it all nonsense? If you think it's hilarious, you are mistaken. Every phrase is true. We are going to be all right. I have faith in my hubby. How did he come to believe in you? I believe the only answer is that you were hit by a Martian hallway. I've seen some bad decisions before, but this one tops them all. It's nearly Darwin Award worthy, but it typically ends in death. But perhaps the end of your marriage will vindicate you. I'm with Rosalind. I am leaving you. Do not try to respond, since you will be blocked. God help you. This came from her first cousin. She lived in another state, and I wondered how long it would be until her extended family found out. Nanette appeared depressed. She'd always liked Linda. You are destroying her. Her life's foundations were ripped out from under her. Are you certain you don't want to stop? Not yet. I've got a couple more things to accomplish before I'm done with her. We literally sent messages to the team's website. The NFL office, the offices of its charities, the mayor, the city council, all official websites, and everybody else we could think of. Nanette swamped Instagram and Twitter. The posts and comments came in as quickly as they could. Then she went through his accounts and did the same. He was regarded as the ideal community-minded athlete. He ran 2 nonprofits and was always doing some kind of voluntary activity. His teammates in the league adored him. It was time to cause some agony. Eric conducted inquiries and obtained the name and phone number of a sports writer who, for unclear reasons, despised the person. He was irritated about being hauled out of bed, but he calmed down when I explained what I had. Eric used a speech scrambler on his phone, so I sounded like a lady. Stop whining. I am giving you an opportunity. Mark is currently with a married woman. He knew she was married since she was with her spouse when he took her out of the Shadow Lounge this evening. It did not appear to be the first time he had done this. If you don't believe me, talk to the bouncer. Her name is Linda Hamilton. She's been married 10 years and has 2 young children. So much for the NFL poster guy. We later discovered that he was enraged because the man had tried the same thing on him. He and his wife had been apart for about a year before reconnecting, and she was still on shaky footing. Also, it was the off-season. There wasn't much going on in local sports, which perhaps made the tale more interesting. To be honest, we wrote letters to the local TV stations and newspapers. I doubted anything would come of it, but Mark was well known and popular, and the Sharks had to scent blood in the water. By 6 a.m., 2 vans, 1 regular reporter, and the paparazzi had gathered at the gates of his exclusive neighborhood. By 8, someone from the team or the central office was knocking on his door. He opened it in his robe, and cameras zoomed in from the vantage point that the videographers had discovered. Linda, who was also wearing a robe, was clearly visible behind his back, so luck was not on their side. The camera clicked madly, which could be heard plainly. His eyes widened as he noticed the reporters, and the man stepped inside and slammed the door shut. Linda accessed her Facebook page as soon as the man finished telling him the entire incident. That house was a mansion of fine brick and timbers, but the scream could be heard from beyond the gate. It was the shriek of a badly injured animal. She tried furiously to deactivate her account, but discovered it had been locked. Nanette later counted them, and it came out that there were almost 3,000 comments on all media platforms within the first 6 hours. Linda had never been this popular. They finally left the residence at 10 o'clock. Linda kept her head covered, but everyone knew who she was. I couldn't believe the coverage. But then again, he was a popular person, and it was the weekend. So the news was slow. She got into the mysterious man's car, and he drove around the house before pulling out of the driveway. This was hardly their first rodeo, and the cameras had noticed the entrance as well. They even managed to capture a nice photo of Linda as she drove past. The man drove her home, and I wondered what she thought alone. I picked up the kids from the babysitter and drove them to my parents' home. We were all pretty close, so I wasn't surprised to see her parents there. Both mothers were Facebook friends, so they knew everything. However, she wasn't alone. 4 automobiles were stalking her home. They now had her address. She got out of the car and dashed to the front door as questions rained down on her. She has a girlfriend now. Had she left her spouse for him? Did your hubby approve of this? It was a particularly foolish question, yet it was asked repeatedly throughout the next 2 weeks. It was stressful talking to her relatives. We know exactly what she did. Everyone in the southern part of the country knows. We also know it was not her on Facebook. Her acts indicate that she is not particularly intelligent. However, she was never suicidal. How could you do that to her? Ask her the same question and get back to me. I had no intention of separating the children from her, but I needed a few days to let everything settle down. Linda was unlikely to look for me in the room we'd hired for our passionate romance, so I came to a halt there. When the receptionist verified the records, he looked at me oddly but granted me a 3-day room. It was amusing to run into my former pals checking out of the hotel as I was heading to my room for the night. I was on adrenaline and wrath and had been awake for 30 hours. Dee hurried up to me. "You are a shithead. Do you realize how much you have wounded Linda?" It was all for nothing. It was only a fantasy she wanted to fulfill. She would have been the same when she arrived home. No, she was damaged. And when anything is ruined, I have 2 options. I need to decide whether it's worth fixing and whether the expense is prohibitively expensive, or if I should get rid of it altogether. Linda has irreparably harmed our marriage, and repairing it is not worth the emotional cost. I never slept with the hockey player. So you acknowledge you've dated him? According to my understanding, you had dinner with him before attending the dance. Even if you didn't sleep with him, it was an opportunity to realize a fantasy, wasn't it? Hubby will be upset if you tell him, but you can persuade him to forgive you, right? The rest of her group moved away, but when she mentioned the hockey player, her husband rushed forward. "I am going to kick you." As I informed the bouncer, I do not fight fairly. I struggled to win. I hit him just at the femur joint, and while he wiggled in pain, I looked down, then at the cameras in the hall. "Everything is on tape, man. Your attempt to assault me as I try to defend myself. Remember, that's a life lesson. And concentrate on what you're going to do with your bitch." I looked around at my erstwhile friends. "I want you to remember this for the rest of your life. I'll probably get divorced soon, but I'll stake big money. I am not the only one. You should think about it and make a decision. I'd wish you well, but honestly, I hope your life blow up as much as you helped mine to. Despite repeated requests and demands, I never slept in my old residence again." Linda was furious at first, not understanding why I was reacting in this manner. It wasn't such a huge deal. Yes, she could have dumped me in the worst way possible and then spent the night having fun with a total stranger. But that was all in the past. It was time to move on. He was famous, for goodness sake. It was over now, so why not return to normal? To be honest, she had feelings for the jackass from when we lived in Chicago and he played there. I used to watch the Bears on occasion, and Linda would join me when the charity poster featuring him on the cover appeared, dressed in long knit shorts and nothing else. She purchased one. It must have been a dream come true when he invited her to dance, and she realized I wasn't going to just trot home like a nice lad. She became enraged when she was presented with a divorce decree, citing adultery as the cause. Linda made every threat she could think of, but I persisted. Linda threw herself at my mercy and was startled when I didn't have any. She barely clung on to her job. It was a near call, and it took some time before her boss told her no more than was absolutely necessary, and even longer before his wife noticed her presence in the room. We were ordinary folks, and it would have remained that way if not for the man she was having fun with. The photographers approached the bouncer and waved green under his nose till he sang like a canary. There were at least 3 further incidents at that club alone. Mark liked to party a lot. I believe he eventually regretted not signing with another team after leaving Chicago. The Panthers were a Carolina club, and North Carolina is an attachment alienation state. He should have picked a residence outside of the state lines. My lawyer urged me not to pursue him until the divorce was finalized, but he, his staff, and the NFL went on full defensive. One evening, I opened the door to my new apartment and noticed a man holding a briefcase in his hands. "Sir, I'd like to talk to you. Go away." I slammed the door and slid the deadbolt back in place. He hammered on the door so violently that I contacted the police, who gently asked him to leave. He looked at the security camera I had installed and shook his fist before departing. I received a call from the team's new owner. He introduced himself, and before he could continue, I stopped him. 4 persons in the world have my phone number, so how did you obtain it? He exhaled. Does it truly matter? Yeah. I hung up and headed immediately to the phone store, demanding a new number. This went on for 8 days until I received another call. "Sir, I represent a children's charity. Go deep. Could I have a moment of your time? I'm sorry, but I already support 3 organizations and don't have the finances to participate in another. You are having a good day." Wait. I am not asking for a donation. In fact, it's just the reverse. I'm willing to pay you a fair sum of money. Why would you want to give me money? Sir, the founder and primary benefactor is Mark Loeb. I hung up again and blocked his phone. They recognized my new email address and sent me lengthy emails about how my actions had harmed the charity and how donations had plummeted significantly. I couldn't help but reply by calling them. So it's my fault that the charity is struggling. How specifically have your claims against Mark harmed his reputation and caused him unnecessary suffering? If you openly stated that you forgive him and your wife for a minor oversight and give him the opportunity to rehabilitate himself, the public's interest in this case would diminish. Let me be clear on this. This man seduced my wife in front of me and roughly 50 witnesses, and the low-level thug he was paying attempted to stop me when I tried to pursue them. She spent the night, and while she refuses to admit to having sex with him, we all know it happened. Tell me what? Have him publicly admit that he had sex with my wife despite knowing she was married. And I will think about it. That would not be in anyone's best interests. Can't we convince you to let sleeping pets laying around? That old hound does not sleep. He's roaring and foaming at the lips, ready to rip a piece out of someone's ass. I will tell you what. Allow him to donate all of his money to a scientist who is working on developing a time travel technology. Get back to my wife, and then we can chat. In the meantime, if he believes things are awful right now, wait a few days and do not contact me again. What are you? I complained to Eric and Nanette about my inability to slam down my cell phone, which sparked an idea, and they developed an app that allowed them to do so. It was an old-fashioned phone sound that you could use to hang up. I'm sure many telemarketers will have an unpleasant surprise in the coming months. They copyrighted, trademarked, or whatever it was to prevent others from profiting off of it. They charged $1 per download and added me to the paperwork, claiming that while it was their expertise, it was my idea. 33 cents was not much. When you double it by 50,000 in only the first 2 months, then it became serious money. I used it to buy a real house rather than an apartment, which pleased the kids. It crushed my heart to leave them, but every time I looked at her, I regretted I hadn't killed her right there. The poor woman was severely deceived. She assumed I would simply accept what she did and go on with my life. Her favorite refrain was, "It was one night." Yes, it lasted one night. One night is too many. Tell the truth. You knew I wouldn't let it happen if I found out soon enough. That's why you had your harlot girlfriends jump in so you could sneak away with your manhood like a robber in the night, because that was exactly who you were. A thief. Linda, you took our future that night, and you can only blame yourself and your asshole. Do you think he is in pain? Hell no, he is not in pain. He is probably chuckling about it as we speak. He doesn't mind that he damaged a family. She OD. I rarely raised my voice in anger, and I never did so in front of or to the children. Looking back, I don't think I did it to her either. Maybe that was the problem. She thought I was weak and feared I would abandon her. The children did not take to it well. Eventually, I sent them to therapy, which began to assist. The therapist was cautious not to disparage their mother, but she did tell them that she had made a terrible mistake in judgment and was now paying the price. She offered us to attend a few sessions separately, and since I was paying, I received a synopsis of the sessions. She continues to deny her guilt and tells the children that while she did something wrong, it was not enough to cause her divorce. When your small child asked her what she'd done, she told her it was an adult thing that she would understand in a few years. Your son is only 4 years old, but he remembers everything he sees and hears in the media. She never explicitly answered his queries. Instead, she informed him she made a terrible mistake and is working hard to correct it. I don't think he believed that and harbors a lot of resentment toward his mother. I was asked the same questions throughout the session, and I answered them as honestly as I could. Yes, son, I am divorcing your mother based on what you have heard. She violated a vow and a commitment by acting in this manner. You understand that when you make a commitment, you have to keep it. When you reach adulthood, things become more serious. In front of 200 people, she made legally and spiritually binding commitments. She knew exactly what would happen if she broke them. She did it anyway. I still adore your mother, but I no longer trust her. And trust is the most important thing. Let's assume I committed to pick you up from school every Wednesday. And I did that for a year. Then I forgot one and left you where you were. I knew I should have picked you up, but I decided I'd rather do something else. How many times will you stand there waiting for me before you realize you can't rely on me to pick you up? Do you believe me when I say it won't happen again? I think I got through to them and followed the therapist's advice. Exactly. I said nothing negative about their mother. I informed them that even though our relationship had altered, we still loved them very much. Aside from that, I avoided talking about their mother unless they brought it up themselves. Linda did the exact opposite. She told the kids that while she committed a grave mistake, it wasn't enough to end the marriage. She assured them that I was just being stubborn and everything would work out. The therapist was furious and remarked in a meeting with her, "How could you do this to your children? Your husband shows no desire to reconcile. Furthermore, during one of our meetings, he discussed divorce with the children. They had enough classmates in the same scenario to gain a general idea of how things work. They had also witnessed enough of their parents' remarriages to know that someone new might enter their lives in the future. Your children believe, and quite appropriately, that your relationship with your husband has ended. I understand you've had multiple chats, but they haven't helped. And I believe I understand why you continue to refuse to accept that you have done anything wrong, let alone divorce as a result of it. I strongly recommend that you seek counseling with a married couple. I don't believe it will help you reconcile, but it may allow you to accept the situation and go on. I shall not see you again. Thank you for attending. Aside from the remark regarding counseling, the ones I requested had little impact on Linda. Her counselor was fairly good, and the judge ordered 8 sessions. If the therapist determined that there was no further development after 4 sessions, she could discontinue any further appointments. On the other side, if she noticed progress, she may extend the sessions. My lawyer attempted to gag me, but I stood up and asked the judge if I could talk. He nodded and warned me to be nice. Your Honor, I need to be clear. I am not interested in pursuing a relationship with my wife other than as co-parents of our children. With that in mind, I plan to attend the sessions, but I refuse to attend more than 8. That should be sufficient to address all of our concerns. I am serious, Your Honor. Yes, you can either put me in jail or fine me, or both if I refuse, but you need to think about this. This divorce is receiving a lot of media attention, and I'm sure you don't want it to become a quagmire of muck. And I, for one, am delighted to speak to the press. One more thing, Your Honor. I want her boyfriend to attend one meeting and explain why he feels sleeping with married women is a good idea and won't harm my marriage. Thank you, sir. My lawyer looked at me as if I had grown 2 heads, and the judge appeared to be torn between laughing and throwing me under the bus. Linda appeared to be about to become physically ill, and her lawyer appeared to be looking for something to complain about. Finally, he slammed the gavel twice. I don't have the power to send him to marriage therapy if he isn't married. I'll write a letter seeking consideration, but I don't have high hopes. Your attorney may inform you that it is completely lawful to demand him to appear in court, but the decision is totally up to you. Counselors, provide a list of therapists or request one from the court. But I want all sides to agree and the sessions to begin in 2 weeks. I will also require sessions to occur twice a week. That way it will end much sooner rather than later. If any of your clients miss a session, I will not scare them with imprisonment. I'll just declare the session valid so they can't reschedule ordered bailiff. Please move to the next case. Linda was not happy, not at all. She waited for me at the car with a determined expression on her face. This needs to end. Please. This is not what I was looking for. I thought it was a horrible idea to speak with her without our lawyers present, but curiosity took control, only for the purpose of conversation. What did you think would happen? I expected you to be angry, yet you loved me enough to put up with it. It was one night. We've been together for years with our family and children. It was not worth tossing away for a single night. It was more than simply one night. It continued every night for the rest of our lives. After that night, what you did was cold, calculated, and completely disrespectful. You deceived me in front of our alleged buddies. Some of them even helped you sneak out the back door like a whore. Before tonight, Linda, I would have bet my life that you loved me and our children. Not anymore. We're split up and no amount of counseling will make it better. I will meet you at the first session. Wait, I need a favor. What favor? Could you ask me? This is about Mark. Could you give him some leeway? It is beginning to have an impact on his charitable work. Think about the children. You mean you and he were thinking about ours the other night? I'm not interested in his charities. And I assure you that his philanthropy will soon be the least of his concerns. Will you tell me how you knew she felt enough remorse to lower her gaze? He called me. Did he? How did he acquire your number? Her face turned red and then it hit me. You handed it to him that night, right? In case he wished to reprise his performance. He did not. I'm not sure why I gave it to him. I just did. I should have known you wouldn't assist. I simply laughed and climbed into the car, wondering at how foolish she had become. While all of this was happening, I was under pressure to be reasonable. The league, the team, every football-related group has charitable purposes. Several sports discussion shows. Everyone was pressing me to leave things alone. Even my boss, a huge fan of the team, put some pressure on me. In response, I obtained a new work. I believe he realized too late how I would react, as well as how it would appear to the rest of our organization and the general public. He attempted to back down and keep me on the team, but it was too late. I worried how angry he was over the complaint I had filed with company human resources. I had a feeling his future was doomed, and I believed it couldn't happen to a more worthy guy. It had gotten so terrible that I began writing down every interaction I had. I didn't do it the first several times, but I eventually did. As a result, the chats were quite brief. The sportscaster we contacted the night the issue began asked me to his radio show. It was his most popular show, and I tossed in a few surprises, fragments from discussions I'd had with other people. One of the most popular lines was about a team owner. He called, became upset, and threatened to sue me. All the sports announcer did was hold back his laughter. You can't see him, but my guest is nodding affirmatively. He doesn't even appear to be impatient. Is there anything you want to say? He nodded when the microphone came on. The first thing I did was laugh. What are you planning to sue me for? For speaking the truth. I checked. And in this state, it is totally legal to record your talks without informing the person you're speaking with. It's called one-party consent. In addition, unless you request otherwise, I will utilize this chat in any legal case. According to my attorney, we have compelling evidence to charge you. The entire team, as well as the National League, have been subjected to harassment and needless mental suffering. Do you have anything more to say? He hung up. The show was picked up by other syndicated shows and briefly made national headlines. I never heard another word from them. Mr. Mark discovered that the press ignored him unless they wanted to talk about the divorce. He was accustomed to being treated as a hero, to being the center of attention, and it frustrated him enormously. Despite his lawyer's warnings not to say anything and to be cautious, he snapped and did something stupid. He came after me at my place. When I first moved into my new home, I installed a cutting-edge security system. Ironically, it was the system he had promoted in the company's ads, and he was correct. It was worthwhile. One night there was a knock on the door, and when I checked my phone, the doorbell camera showed 3 very huge men standing on my house's porch. They didn't seem happy. I had my children with me, so I clicked the silent alarm button, which automatically notified the police. They called immediately. You'd be astonished at how many folks accidentally set it off. Sir, this is 911. Did you trigger the alarm? Yes. There are 3 really enormous males standing on my doorstep. 3 men? I do not know. 3 men who do not appear happy. I did not open the door, and now they're pounding on it, demanding that I let them inside. Sir, we have an automobile 4 minutes away. If you are concerned for your safety, do not open the door. I thanked them and waited 3.5 minutes before opening the storm door, ensuring that it was locked. What can I do for you? Mark directed us to reason with you. You will immediately drop all legal actions against him. If I don't, we'll teach you a lesson about cooperation. You are trespassing, gentlemen. Please leave the premises immediately. The largest of them exhaled. Well, boys, it appears that this man needs convincing. When he ripped the storm off its hinges, he could have been using styrofoam material. They were about to enter when they heard a voice from behind them. Police officers will immediately stop you and ask you to turn around with your hands up. If looks could kill, they wouldn't need to touch me to get what Mark desired. The big guy appeared to be about to join the fight, but his buddies talked him out of it. Soon they were all on the ground, handcuffed. The sergeant took my report, reviewed the tapes, and charged them all with trespassing. I later discovered that trespassing carries a much harsher penalty. The difference was that trespassing is typically a spontaneous decision with no serious criminal intent. If, on the other hand, you come onto someone's property with the intent to cause them harm, that's a completely different story. It turned out that one worked at the stadium as a keeper, and the other was just a friend of the third. He was on the team's practice squad, but he was immediately expelled. Apparently, Mark had promised him a spot on the team if he did him this favor, even though he had no authority to do so. The rest of them were getting $1,000 a buck each. It cost Mark a lot more because he had to pay the lawyer's bills. I don't know how much it cost him, but they all pleaded guilty and got a huge fine that Mark had to pay. He had to go to court for setting it all up, and even his hero status couldn't save him. His lawyers managed to reduce the case to a misdemeanor. He had to pay a $5,000 fine and do 200 hours of community service. TMZ made a video of him in an orange vest picking up trash on the highway. It hit YouTube and gained 600,000 views in the first week. Linda was rapidly becoming the most expensive woman he'd ever gone after. Some fans turned against him, and although it wasn't visible on TV, signs appeared in the stands as the new season began. It was affecting his play, and one group put up a large banner, "Put someone's wife on the goal line. It will make him focus." Of course, stadium security made them take the poster down, but it was too late. Within 3 hours, the video went viral and racked up 750,000 views in the first 2 days. Mark went from being a franchise player to getting little playing time, and one of his sponsors scrapped a campaign they'd started until things settled down, which meant never. The law of averages caught up with me one night. They came out of nowhere, 4 of them. They beat the shit out of me, and I ended up with 2 broken fingers on my hand, a broken leg, a cracked cheekbone, and bruised ribs. These guys knew what they were doing because it all happened in about 90 seconds. I don't know how much damage they would have had time to do if it hadn't been for a coworker who came out of the office right after me. When he yelled, they demonstrated their professionalism by immediately running away. 10 minutes later, I was in an ambulance, and an hour later, I in the room where they left me overnight for observation due to a concussion. My head was splitting, and I was falling in and out of consciousness. One day, I woke up and thought I saw Linda sitting there, but I immediately blacked out briefly. When I woke up again, I was alone. It was 7 days before I was able to return to work. The cops had gotten some surveillance images from several businesses across the street, but none of them had anything identifiable on them. The police officer who took my statement gave me some advice. "If you've messed with anyone lately, tell me." These guys were professionals. They avoided cameras as much as possible, wore big hats and loose clothing. So we don't have faces or anything recognizable like tattoos or scars. I told him my sad story. I was told that he laughed when they questioned him and admitted that he didn't like me, but that he had nothing to do with the attack. They didn't believe it for a minute, but they had no proof. I had to give up my weekends with the kids. I wasn't physically fit, and I didn't want them to see me until the bruises came off. Linda was horrified by what had happened, but agreed. She even offered to come over and help. I politely declined the counseling session dragged on, as it usually does. It was a wash, rinse, repeat cycle that went on for 4 sessions before even the therapist got bored with it. On the 5th session, she asked us not to interrupt her as she spoke. We've reached an impasse, and frankly, I don't think we'll ever move over it. Linda, you refuse to admit that what you was wrong by conventional standards, and you refuse to think that should stop your marriage. Am I? You left your husband in the middle of a club, and then, poof, you left to spend the night with another man. You did it completely unannounced and used your friend so he wouldn't stop you. Tell me if he had done that to you. Left you standing in the midst of a public area, surrounded by your so-called friends who were involved in the deceit. Would you have been sympathetic? Judging on your actions and communication here, I highly doubt it. Hold on. Don't speak. Think about it while I talk to your hubby. She turned to me with an expression of anguish on her face. You'll never get her back. That's as apparent as the nose on your face. From the manner you and I have been interacting, it goes without saying. I understand. I really do. But let me ask you something. Up to the moment she left the club with another man, you adored her. She was faithful and steadfast. Your wife has been saying for years that it was a one-time act, which she does not understand. However, it was essential enough to jeopardize her marriage. She claims she's over it and won't do it again. Is there anything left in you to try again? I will let your wife speak first. Please do not interrupt. You will have your say later. Agreed. She nodded at Linda, and we waited a minute for her to gather her thoughts. You've mentioned several times that I feel no sorrow for my acts. I have regrets. Lots, much remorse. I never imagined it would jeopardize our marriage until the divorce. I knew I had deeply injured you, and I knew you would be upset. But frankly, I never expected you to react the way you did. I am deeply sorry that my actions harmed you, and I can tell you that I will never do anything like that again. Especially now that I understand the cost of such behaviors. I ask you, even if you don't fully forgive me, come home and let me make things right. She appeared pleased with her speech and glanced at me eagerly. You can say whatever you want, Linda, but you knew how much your actions hurt us. You knew I wasn't the kind of man who would just brush it aside and say, "It's only once. She says she won't do it again." Bullshit. If I did that, you would lose all respect for me and you might stop aggressively seeking her out. But if another opportunity arose, you'd flee like a bastard knowing I'd forgive. I don't do that anymore, and I will never put myself in that situation again where I have to forgive you despite the clear disrespect you displayed. Even before I left, the loss of confidence in my marriage exacerbated the situation. If you had been gone for more than 30 minutes, I would have worried whether you were having fun with him or someone else. Let me make this as plain as possible to you. We are not remaining married. I am divorcing you. This can be dragged out. Use every possible delaying strategy. However, the court will soon weary of it all. Please stop procrastinating. I looked at the counselor. Are we finished? She exhaled. Yes, I shall present my report to the court by Wednesday. Assume the marriage is irreversibly broken and urge that they grant the divorce. No, I will not give up. Please, sweetheart, think about the children. I'm thinking about the children. I think of them every day. I do not have them. Linda, if your children were so important to you, how many times did you think about them when he was shaking you? His mansion. Was the vacation worth it to you? Perhaps for the rest of your family who had yet to experience the real world? Not very much. Linda, face it. You botched up. Pun intended. See you in court. I believe she gradually realized the repercussions of her actions. Everyone was just tired. The end. Her attorney was fatigued. My attorney was fatigued. The judge was fatigued. One of the bailiffs appeared to have aged 5 years since the trial began. Following the therapist's report, the judge called off another attempt to stall and declared us divorced. Linda went out of court without saying anything, and my lawyer only smiled when I posed the question. Now he grinned like a crazed mountain lion. Yes. The following day, Mr. Mark was sued for alienation of affection. He did not have to sign with the Panthers or purchase a home in North Carolina. I'm heard his outburst was enormous. He is unable to do it. His attorney sighed. Unfortunately, he can. It remains on the books in North Carolina. Before you begin, sure, it is an antiquated statute that should have been removed decades ago. Most states did. Unfortunately, this is not one of those. My advice is to resolve the case as soon as possible and leave it behind you. The infamy could cost you more than the payment. Everyone in his sphere contacted me, including his lawyers, the heads of his charities, team officials, and even the NFL commissioner, pleading for an out-of-court settlement. The offers continued coming, and even my lawyer advised me to accept, but I refused. It didn't matter that I wouldn't receive anything. What mattered was that I could toss it into the mud. The investigators my lawyer hired convinced the bouncer and the team leader that they had been paid to assist them in achieving their objectives. Mark tried to avoid appearing in court, but he was forced to testify multiple times. One of the performances was on a Friday, and he attempted to justify himself by claiming that he needed to fly to another city that day to prepare for a rare Saturday game. The judge wasn't a football aficionado. Take a later trip and arrive in this courtroom tomorrow. I believe he put us on the docket as late as possible to upset him. The man was charming, and his lawyers attempted to assemble a jury of women. But my lawyer was astute enough to outwit them several times. They hired 7 women, 3 of whom were over 50 and happily married. 1 was a lesbian. 2 were young and single. Finally, there was a blonde who had recently divorced. 2 of the guys were young and unmarried, while the remaining 3 were married and middle-aged. First, he said he had never seen her and that they had traveled down the path of shame. So he had to admit she had been in his home. Then he started denying that they had sex, claiming that he was trying to protect her from her abusive spouse. Linda decided that describing her experience in a letter might help me grasp her thoughts. And because the letter was addressed to me and was in my possession, we were able to exhibit it in court. Nobody believed the ruse with the aggressive husband. Linda's court presence sealed the deal. She admitted everything, including how many times she had slept with him. I had no idea. In the letter, she said 3 or 4, but it was actually 5. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning with a verdict. The trial included financial disclosure, and I believe everyone in the courtroom was astounded by his net worth. He played in the NFL for 7 years and acquired a fortune of $96 million. When I was granted around 1/3 of the $30 billion, I thought my lawyer would pass out. It was the highest prize in the state's history, yet it was comparable to what other spouses earned. The previous biggest payout was $8.8 million. Despite recent changes in the regulations, Up to 1/3 of the defendant's assets can still be paid. Of course, when this was passed, no one anticipated a case involving millions of dollars. There were several attempts in the state legislature to overturn this statute, but none of them passed committee. I was lucky. His lawyers pouted and sought to appeal, quietly advising him to accept the offer and be done with it. They filed a notice of intent to appeal, but dropped it a month later and accepted the court's judgment. Apparently, there was a legal loophole that allowed the defendant's fortune to grow during the appeal while he still lost, and the amount of the settlement was changed correspondingly. A few months later, he had a large contract payment ready for him. The day after I obtained the reward, my attorney served him with 4 other cases from married couples and divorced men and women who claimed. Among the 4, 2 were divorced. One marriage was still on precarious ground, while another couple turned out to be swingers who believed he had picked her. But as the offered train was about to leave the station, they rushed aboard. Linda and the other divorced women each filed separate lawsuits. I'd already grabbed a sizable chunk of the pie, and part of the seduction had occurred years before, and they settled out of court fast, receiving $4 million each. Nonetheless, the son of a bitch ended up with tens of millions. The saga wasn't done. It turned out that he was having an affair with one of his colleagues' wives and had a one-night encounter with another. The detectives discovered a little-known information, which I was delighted to present during the next play. Several players either fell or blocked in the wrong direction, and he was hit 3 times, the last of which forced him to leave the game due to concussion protocol. There were no excuses, but everyone understood that continuing to play for the Panthers was not an option. They traded him to Green Bay, where he performed admirably, but not spectacularly. The Panthers refused to pay out on his contract, claiming a morals clause, which significantly reduced his salary. He had to settle for 20% of his potential earnings. Green Bay signed him to a 1-year contract and then refused to pay him what he sought when it ended. So he headed to Denver for another 1-year, $4 million contract. He played with full strength. And after his contract expired, other organizations were interested enough to give him a deal, albeit at a considerably reduced pay. He eventually signed a 2-year contract with Cincinnati for a salary of $2.5 million. It contained strong moral stipulations, including the confiscation of all he had earned to date if he was caught in compromising circumstances. While his play was not poor, it was not consistent with his heyday, and they refused to grant him another contract when his existing one expired. He was 34 years old, battered, and suffering from continuous ailments, so he retired and worked as a radio announcer for the Bengals for 2 years. After that, he was a nobody. The guy still had a fortune of around $50 million, which was roughly 1/3 or less of what he could have had if not for lawsuits and negative press. When last heard of, he had purchased 2 vehicle dealerships in California and was back to his old antics. One of the spouses took it personally, and Mark walks with a noticeable limp. I doubt he has learned anything. I spotted a photo of him in a sports magazine and wondered, where are they now? Where he was photographed during the launch of the 3rd dealership. He had a decent spare tire and shaved his head when he started turning bald. Nonetheless, all the millions and his glory days will most likely continue to allure the females. I considered forwarding the article to Linda. Linda received half of what we had accumulated and was able to maintain the house until the final child turned 18. Then she could purchase it, or we could sell it and split the proceeds. She also received child support based on my previous earnings. They were still my children, so if they needed anything else, they received it. I purchased her a new SUV because her car had been totaled and she hadn't received her payment yet. My children needed reliable and safe transportation. I frequently wondered if the fact that I received all of those millions simply because she was a woman and did not have access to any of them was a hindrance to her. Linda was not utterly poor. She eventually received a compensation from her lover, and because Nanette and Eric had developed an app based on my idea while we were still married, she received half of my share. For years, the app was quite popular, especially after they added the ability to chat while being pummeled. The most popular were, "Go to hell, kiss my ass, and never goddamn call me again." They are priced at $5 each. Her annual salary was around $30,000 for roughly 3 years, after which the method became less popular, and the rewards decreased significantly. I didn't need money, but I placed my portion into the kids' college fund, telling them that when they were older and heard that their college fund had grown, I would calculate it as correctly as possible. The lawsuits, the loss of a lucrative contract and notoriety, the reduction in payouts, and the shortening of Mark's career cost him between $110 and $170 million, making Linda one of the most costly whores in history. I suppose everyone should be famous for something. Dee got divorced less than a year after we did. Janie and her husband stayed together for another 18 months until they parted ways. The ones whose wives had previously cheated divorced before my divorce was finalized. As far as I know, the rest remained as couples. I didn't care. After that last morning, I never spoke with them again. 6 years had passed, and I would occasionally wake up and reach for Linda. I usually did not remarry after having a dream about how we were before the tragedy. I was still slightly hesitant with ladies, but I began dating. I was startled by the quantity of women who desired deeper connections, until I discovered they were for my money. This made me very wary. Both youngsters are currently very interested in soccer. My son does it primarily for social and recreational purposes. However, my daughter is quite passionate about it and has some good talent. Her best buddy plays a little better than she does, and I got to know her and her mother via all the sleepovers. Scarlett was erratic and self-conscious as a result of her psychotic ex. I learned from her daughter that she was struggling financially since her spouse disappeared and stopped paying child support without saying anything to her. I found him and arrested him for failing to pay child support. He had an excellent job, and the judge ordered him to pay all arrears within 2 years or face jail. This caused the payments to quadruple each month, allowing them to breathe easier. I never informed her that I was the one who found him. Scarlett began smiling more, stopped slouching, and acquired a new wardrobe. The transformation was remarkable, and men began approaching her, particularly once she began wearing those tight shorts to games and practices. She had grown accustomed to me by this point. I became her shield. The girls used to group us together all the time. I'm not sure when it occurred, but we frequently held hands while the girls dragged us to their gatherings. They ended up staying overnight frequently, with the girls sharing a room and Scarlett in the guest room. My money allowed me to purchase a really magnificent home. It was located on 40 acres of hills and lowlands. They had a pond, a 10-acre pasture, and a 6-stall barn. The previous owners loved horses. It wasn't long before the home was packed with horses. I approached the idea with considerable reservations. I hadn't got much experience with horses, and their size and big fangs worried me. Scarlett giggled quietly at me. She grew up on a farm and had a horse when she was younger. After 5 months, I gave in and told her to find horses for the kids, including her, and one for herself. I would cover all expenses, leaving her with simply the responsibility of teaching the children to ride and caring for them. I will pay, but I am not going to shovel shit. There was a lot of muttering, but Scarlett held her ground. Either they care for their animals, or we get rid of them. I'm not sure when we started making decisions about kids together. Scarlett simply took the initiative, and I followed her lead. Scarlett bought me a horse for Christmas, a large pinto with a sneaky sparkle in his eye. It required a lot of begging. Finally, Scarlett threatened to cease spending time with me unless I started riding with them. This caused the children to panic. The girls had reached the age when their bodies began to change, and they informed her about their anxieties and concerns. My youngster clearly missed his maternal figure. He was dealing with a lot of issues during the divorce, and Scarlett appeared to help. I learned to ride and finally began scooping horse manure. Scarlett had us pile the rubbish, and once it matured, she would use it as compost in her garden. I'm not sure when I consented to start a vegetable garden, but one day we went to get a cultivator and hand tools. She attempted to operate the cultivator, but the large equipment bounced her around. I took over once I had finished laughing, which enraged her beyond words. She could run the plot once it had been tilled and leveled out, but if she wished to broaden the story twice, I was summoned back to duty. The youngsters assisted because she warned them that if they did not, they would be unable to consume anything that grew. Then she told them the fable about the red hen. They thought it was humorous, but they understood the meaning. We'd just taken the girls to soccer camp. When I inquired if she believed she'd ever start dating again, she said she was wary of being single. Her face turned scarlet and she said, Do you really dislike what's going on? Make an expression on it." But then she began laughing. "I'm dating. He's a decent guy, despite the fact that he's mostly unaware of his surroundings." Jealousy rushed through me like lightning. She saw it and smiled. "I'm dating you, foolish. How often have we gone out to eat, to the movies, or on field trips with the kids? I'm not sure why I even keep an apartment. We already spend 5 days a week with you, but it's all for family reasons." You're totally correct. I'd draw you a picture, but I'm worried you'd have a breakdown trying to figure it out. It's family-related since we've become a family. Your children already refer to me as Mom while you are not present. Kelsey intends to take you to school on Father-Daughter Day. It's a good thing she's attending a different school now, or there would be a significant scheduling conflict. She had already taken my hand. It's a good thing your youngster attended science camp. I've been in love with you for a long time, honey. I appreciate your perspective since I am aware that your ex has caused you significant harm. But tell me, when was the last time you were with another woman? You can't, do you? Maybe you have feelings for someone, but we are terrified to inform her. That will change today. It is time to make a decision. If you desire me, turn straight towards your home. If not, turn left and drive me to my flat. It's your decision. We had just drove up to an intersection. I fiddled with the signal and smiled. Look at this. I believe the left turn signal is broken. Then I had best turn right. I would hate to cause a collision. Her smile overshadowed the sun. There will be a collision. A large one. The youngsters will most likely hear everything in their camps. Now hurry up. Let's go home. I smirked as we approached our driveway. Fortunately, I acquired a property with extra bedrooms. Kelsey needs to choose one of them. Her grasp on my arm almost cut off my circulation. That will be unnecessary. The girls have already chosen to share a room, at least temporarily. I'm sure they'll want their own bedrooms eventually. But just now, they are together. And who knows? We could need an extra bedroom someday. We snuggled together for a few minutes after the garage door closed. We finally drew away. She lifted my face in her hands and gazed into my eyes. You don't discuss it, but I do know what happened to your first wife. I just want you to know that I'm not really into the club scene. But when I commit entirely. I do not have much, but I do have honor. And I promise you that in future relationships, I will never do anything like that. Ever. I promise. Is this enough? I smiled as I stared into those soulful, loving eyes. Later, she offered to sign a prenuptial agreement, but after my reaction, she chuckled and never mentioned it again. Linda was having a difficult time for quite some time. The consequences of being so open with me, as well as the alienation of affection lawsuit that dominated headlines for weeks, plagued her like a stray dog begging for a handout. She resigned her previous employment because her suitcase was too hefty to transport every day. She was financially secure thanks to her share of the pie. She took her time and didn't work for about a year. She then accepted a position at a tiny, newly established company. She conducted her research and spent $1 million in a startup, acquiring a 10% interest in the company. A year later, she was promoted, and the company started to grow. I researched them primarily out of idle curiosity. They had a fantastic product and a solid business model, but they were severely underfunded. I discussed this extensively with my financial advisors, and when they went public, I surreptitiously deposited $5 million in our children's names and handed Linda voting proxies. Regardless of what she did to me, she always considered her children's best interests. As a result of the transaction, she became the controlling partner when the business needed to be separated. She was promoted to vice president, sales and production. Linda worked 50 hours per week or more and seemed to thrive. Furthermore, the youngsters were frequently at my place, staring at their younger brother with excitement. Scarlett, who was 6 years younger, told me that one of the marriage's criteria was the birth of at least one kid, Daniel Brock. That was his grandfather's name when he was nearly 2. And I was delighted the older kids liked him so much since it gave Scarlett a break from time to time. At my persuasion, she changed her career and became a stay-at-home mom. It was a full-time job with 3 teenagers and a 2-year-old to care for. I still don't sleep well, and occasionally in the middle of the night my eyes open and I wonder where I would be now if Linda hadn't cheated. Then I noticed something. If I got up to get a drink or use the restroom. Scarlett was agitated when I returned, but as soon as I lay down and caressed her, she fell fast asleep. Frequently, I awoke to find her virtually on top of me. It seemed as if she didn't feel pleased or comfortable unless we made physical contact. I also noticed that we often held hands while we strolled or went shopping, unless one of us had to go fetch the kids. Then she placed her hand back in mine. I scoured my memories. Linda always slept as far away from me as possible, claiming she was too hot for comfort. We were attending our son's high school graduation. Scarlett went to shoot photos with his mates. Linda's new husband accompanied her because his son and others were great friends, which is what originally brought them together. As it did for Scarlett and me, they had been married for 3 years and appeared happy. She glanced at me with a sad expression. "Can we speak for a minute?" "Sure, what is this about? I need to give you something." 12 years late, an apology. It took me 4 years and considerable treatment to truly grasp what I did to you and the suffering you endured. For what it's worth, I apologize. Even today, I can't explain why I did that and assumed everything would be fine. And this comes after years of counseling. For years, I couldn't think straight because I was so upset with you for divorcing me. It didn't seem like a big deal in my distorted perception of reality. I had the opportunity to sleep with a prominent person, and I seized it without hesitation. You should have been proud of me. I looked at her and she grinned. I know reality did not arrive for a long time. After nearly 2 years of therapy, my counselor asked me who was on your celebrity list. Remember all of the folks we'd sleep with if we were single and had the opportunity? I immediately thought of Anne Hathaway. I'm still crushing on her. I grinned. Yes, I like her. I believe she has gotten even better attractive as she has gotten older. My psychologist asked me how I would feel if we were at a premiere or something and you had the opportunity to sleep with her. You had someone distract me and then you left with her, and when you got home, you like it was no big deal and questioned why I was unhappy. I laughed at first. He'd never do something like that to me. I told her. Then she made me think about it as if it had actually happened. And everyone knows about it. I closed my eyes and repeated everything in my brain. I was nearly enraged thinking about it. That's when the breakthrough occurred. As enraged as I was with you in the fantasy, I did the exact same thing to you in reality. Nothing could change that, so this is my apology. I was incorrect to behave the way I did. You had every cause to divorce me. If you had left, I would never have trusted you again, no matter how many times you said you loved me and promised it would never happen again. If I had known then what I know now, I would have laughed in his face when he invited me to dance. I thought about it for a moment. Thank you, Linda. It helps me feel slightly better. I pondered about it as I went away. The water that passes over the dam is not recycled. Burned bridges are extremely difficult to reconstruct. You accept life's challenges and do your best with what you have. I spend a lot of time with Linda, but with Scarlett, I have it all. Thank you for taking time to hear today's story. If you loved the story, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to share regarding your own or someone else's circumstance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.